I actually became paralyzed overnight, and I was let go of my job. I lost my job. After that, it was like, okay, now I got to figure out what I'm going to do with my life. We don't know if I'll ever walk again. We don't know if I'll ever be normal again. The worst moment of my life was seeing when my daughter walked into the room and looked at her dad hooked to tubes, and she didn't want to get near me. It got to a point where they're like, all right, he's either going to die, or he may never get out ever. He'll live on tubes forever.
Hey everybody, thank you for joining us for today's episode of Real Estate Disruptors. Today we have AJ Osborne with Cedar Creek Capital and AJ Flynn from Boise, Idaho to talk about how he's acquired $350 million in self-storage. It's an insane number, almost unfathomable to even picture. Now guys, I'm on a mission to create 100 millionaires. The information on the show alone is enough to help you become a millionaire in the next 5 to 7 years. If you'll take consistent action, you will become one. And guys, if you get value today, if you get value out of the show, please hit that subscribe button. That way we can help more people grow together. Do not keep us a secret. That will not help me accomplish my goals of creating millionaires. You ready?
Ready, man.
All right. So first question is, what was your life like right before you got into real estate?
Yeah. So I followed in my father's footsteps and I sold insurance. Mm-hmm. So selling insurance took my father out of poverty, extreme poverty, right? They didn't have running water. He poached for food, would literally go up in the mountains in rural Idaho and they'd shoot to eat. So he grew up with, outhouse, no warm water kind of stuff. And he decided he wanted to change his life. And so he sold insurance. And so I thought growing up, that's my route too. That was a way I could get control, right? Of whatever I wanted to do. I was dyslexic, ADD, very bad. So I left school at 15, I think. I left school. I actually ended up going to college at 16. But I knew that the traditional route wasn't going to really probably work for me. So I thought, okay, sales is great. And at the time, I thought it was like me controlling my income. I'm my own boss. I can sell. I can make it, right?
That's what we all think before we get into it.
Yeah, that's what we all think before we get into it. And then I quickly learned this is a treadmill. Like this is just nonstop. I got to sell. I got to make money. If I don't, me and my wife, we had to live on very little of our income because we didn't know like that. It was an unpredictable way to live. So that's what life was like prior. And what
kind of insurance was it?
Group medical, so health insurance.
Okay.
And we decided real estate was our way to basically stabilize or try to create some kind of stabilization of income and to offset risk.
Yeah.
Because we had times where, my income was 35% less than it was the prior month or 40% less. So it fluctuated massively. And so it was like, we got to do something to gain control over our life. And this thing that I thought gave me control didn't. I thought that it was better than a W-2 and I had no boss. But then I'm like, actually, all my clients are my bosses and they fire me. So it just means I get fired more.
That was, for me, like the biggest transformation when I left Intel, right? Leaving a W-2 job to become a realtor. It was like, I'm self-employed.
Yeah.
Right. I'm my own boss.
Yep.
Like, no. Everyone's your boss. Every homeowner is your boss. Every buyer is your boss.
Yep.
And
they can call you anytime.
Anytime.
You don't get off at 5. Oh, no. It's weekends. Everything. It's nonstop.
Well, that's like almost when it starts, right?
Because like, a realtor, you're right.
You're working from 9. Like you don't start at 8 a.m. as a realtor, right? Like maybe 9:30, and you start your day and you're doing follow up and this and that. But like showings, or when they're off the clock.
Yes.
So yes sir, yes ma'am, no sir, no ma'am to everybody.
Everybody.
So that was your life.
That was my life. And I don't regret it at all, obviously. And it was an amazing opportunity option. I don't want to make it sound like it was bad but it wasn't what I wanted. And two, not only what I wanted, but I looked at it as there was no way to grow, because it was attached to my time. And that's the same thing as a W-2. So with it being attached to my time, there's only so much I could scale or grow. And I could never stop.
Would you consider yourself self-employed at that time?
Yes, I would, because it was all commission-based. So my father started, he worked for some very large insurance companies. then he started a brokerage firm, which I went and worked under, and we just got paid commissions. So
Sure.
the great thing is like, well, you eat what you kill, right? You either make money or you don't. Nobody cares. You don't get paid.
So, but you're just straight up trading time for money.
100%. It was if I provide you value, or if I get this, I get paid. If not, I don't at all.
Right.
And it was like you wonder, how long can I even live? So if I'm not able to do this thing, like, how long? I guess we looked at our savings. Well, how long will this even feed our family?
Yeah.
And so that was an interesting place to be in, because even with that said, in that sales role, it's not like I could go get a job. It's not like, oh, I'm an engineer or I'm whatever, and then if I get laid off, I can go, somebody else will want to employ me, right? It's no, where do I go from here? So I loved it, and it taught me incredibly good skills, but it was not, in my view, sustainable.
Sure.
And it definitely wouldn't take me to anywhere where I really wanted to be in life. And so we started to look at other forms, and self-storage was our thing that we liked and fell into. Now, it's really important to know, I think a lot of people are like, oh yeah, self-storage, and it's a hot thing. So at the time, not only was it not, nobody knew about it. It was.
When was this?
We're talking early 2000s.
So like
2004, 5.
Yeah.
This was an asset class that most people didn't even know, right?
Yeah.
Like normal people didn't know. Banks didn't want it. Investors didn't want it. We
Really?
were buying things at like 10 caps, 12 caps, because nobody wanted it.
You know what? Because I got in real estate in 2007, right?
Yeah.
You know what my opinion was of self-storage when I got in 07?
What?
So basically what you do is you buy land in the freaking boonies,
Yep.
right? And then at some point,
You're excited.
and it might be someone's farmland,
It'll grow.
right? And then as they expand in that direction, then eventually it's not land.
Yep.
You turn it into a nursery. You sell trees, you sell plants, whatever, right? Where people would drive all the way out there to get plants at a discount price that's significantly cheaper than Home Depot. And then as it developed further, the city, then you convert it into self-storage. And then as it grew further, then you would tear that down and then turn it into office, industrial, or maybe
That's how
house.
everybody thought of it. It was a land hold.
Yeah.
And it was a land hold that made you some money. And
Right.
so it was kind of a good deal. We thought of it as, no, this is an asset class we liked. And the guiding principle behind it was, some of the basic stuff. There's no toilets. And so we liked that. But really how I looked at it, being in sales and sales brokerage, I was in an all cash based, right? All of it. So we didn't have assets, right? You didn't have equity. It was just cash.
You don't have
based.
anything for collateral if you needed a loan.
Nothing. And so it was, okay, this is a collateral-based, equity-based thing that I can own. But I viewed it as this cash flow part of it's interesting that no other real estate asset class had. And I viewed that I could change it. So it was more like a business to me than it was real estate, because there was things that I could do within the self-storage facility that I couldn't do, and I could change immediately. So I looked at it and said, there's actually operations here. And that ended up becoming the whole crux of our business and everything, where I said self-storage isn't real estate, it's a business. So I'm buying a business, an underperforming business, and turning it into a good one. And I loved that. It was like my two worlds met, right? Business and real estate, they came together, and it was awesome. So nobody wanted them, so we could get high margins, high cash flow. Nobody really did anything with them. It was like there was no operations for most people that owned them at the time. So then it was easy for us to turn them around and get upside in it. So although it was a real estate, to me, it was a cash play. It was revenue focused. And it was cash flow, and it was a revenue focused business, which I would be buying with 100% analyzing and underwriting it, that the revenue should be at this point. So I wasn't buying and holding it. I was buying it to change that revenue.
How did you know to do that?
So at first, when we bought it, we had a very complex business strategy. And that was that we would make people pay their bills. We would let people know we were there, and we'd answer the phone. And that was our business strategy. And it worked like magic, because that was things that other people just didn't do.
Yeah.
And but it was like literally, we're like, we can do better, and I can raise the rents because you have this much vacancy, you have your economic occupancy, is 70%, your physical occupancy is 100%, and your delinquencies are 15% or 10%. And I'm like, your delinquencies alone, I can increase gross revenue by 10, 15%.
Right.
That's a 50% increase then on my net profit after debt.
Right. So this all makes sense.
Yeah.
Logically. Right. But
Implementation's different.
But when you got into it,
Yeah.
how much business acumen did you know? Like, did you have a lot of business acumen because you were working in the sales side, selling insurance?
Yeah, I think I had more than other people. I think I was fortunate because my dad, who didn't graduate from college or anything, but we had our brokerage firm. But because I worked in group medical, I actually got to work with businesses. So I would work with the C-suite of businesses because we'd be working with their insurance side, and I got to see a lot of businesses. And I guess
just you say C-suite. So just for context, who were some of your clients? Most business owners waste their time and money on solutions that never fix the root problems. They'll address all the symptoms due to slow revenue, and because they're only fixing the consequences, the real problem stays hidden and the cycle of wasting time and money continues. It's like having a lingering headache that won't go away despite trying every over-the-counter medicine. When in reality, you should have just gone to the doctor and had them figure out exactly what was causing the headache. And that's what's so difficult about business. You can see and feel the symptoms and yet struggle to find it. Now imagine you can find a prescription that doesn't just mask the symptoms, but actually addresses the root cause. Where would your business be if you addressed that right now? That's what our sales event is about. Your marketing doesn't suck, your leads aren't bad, and your operations aren't terrible. It's that you haven't addressed what actually makes you money in wholesale, which is the conversations you have with homeowners. It's critical that you build trust with sellers, demonstrate that you fully understand their situation, know exactly what's keeping them up at night, and paint the ideal outcome that leads them to a better future by working with you. That's what it takes to get signed contracts and keep your business going. Simply put, at our event, you'll walk away with the framework, phrases, questions, documents, and process to close more sales and buy more houses. Join the hundreds of others who have come to our live event and dramatically grown their business. Our event is happening soon and is available for you to join only if you're willing to take the pill.
So we had clients that were really big clients. We actually got Albertsons. We got like Jacksons. We got their huge gas station chains. We got large hospitals. We ended up getting big clients.
So you have relationships with people that know business.
Yes. And
Gotcha.
we could ask them and we could talk to them. And we had lots of clients. So we had like 300 and we could actually see and we'd talk about it. And it was fun. It was like a game for me and my dad. Because what we would do is we'd start looking and we'd be talking and we'd ask them all these questions. Then we'd leave and we'd be like, I wonder how good their business is doing. So we're like, all right, here's what they sell. Here's their cost of goods sold. This is how many employees they have. This is how much they make. This is, and so we'd kind of analyze and look at those businesses and try to see how that was working. And it was a game for us. We liked it, right? But it did give me, I think, obviously insight that other people didn't get.
Yeah.
And when we looked at storage, it was super simple, right? But we understood the basic tenets of sales. And you have to pick up the phone. You've got to let people know you're there, right? And that sounds so dumb and simple, but nobody was doing that because they looked at it as real estate. You don't do sales in real estate. Somebody leases out that spot and it's done, right?
Well, I mean, like I was saying, like when I first got into real estate, like that was my concept. This is what self-storage is. It's just there to preserve the value of the land or add value to the land, but it was not meant to necessarily be optimized.
Yes, exactly. And then when a better usage came along, you would change it.
Right.
And that's how people viewed it. And two, also, banks didn't like it. Like it was a trashy asset. It was like you had junkyards and storage. And banks didn't like it at all. They didn't want to lend on it. One of the reasons that self-storage did so well through 2008 that people don't realize is it was the lowest debt to equity of any commercial real estate asset because banks didn't want to loan any money to it. And then people held it as a land hold. And so they had no debt on it.
Right.
So in a debt crisis, of course it's going to do well, right? And we have big margins. But when the asset was not, people just didn't like it because they thought it was a fad. Like, so many people literally thought this is a fad and this will be gone. They also
I can hear that argument today. I can't imagine that argument back then.
Yeah, it's crazy. And even back then you had a lot of banks, and a common theme was this is the first thing people will default on when they got in trouble. Turns out it was actually the last.
Yes, the exact opposite.
It's the exact opposite. And that shocked everybody through 2008. I mean, self-storage is it's the top performing asset in 25 years, and it's the lowest defaulting. So imagine that. You have the number one performing and the lowest defaulting in the same category.
You wouldn't know that if you watched Storage Wars.
No, you wouldn't. So it's a very interesting combination, and they think they just had it so wrong. Now, after 2008, boy, did that change. And now we know, like today, where self-storage is a really hot topic. And it's a really hot asset class because of how it performed. But that's a 10-year period of time that people went from saying this is a trash asset that won't even be around, it's a fad, to this is like the top asset class and everybody wants to be in it. In just literally less than 10 years, from 2015 to 2020, really.
I mean, I really don't quite fully understand it because like I see them everywhere.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering like when is vacancy going to catch up with how much
Yeah, it's crazy, right?
Yeah.
One of the biggest things that happened was self-storage moved from the industrial parks and the bad side of town into the neighborhoods.
Right.
And in self-storage, I think a lot of people don't understand where demand comes from. And it's an economic and a regulatory function. So as we've had a very tight in-lock incline of cost of real estate, along the lines with right now, something like 80% of all new subdivisions, homes, everything else like that are built in HOAs. So regulations and cost of real estate since the 90s has exploded.
Right.
So in the 80s, right, if our parents wanted to wanted a new car and wanted a shop to house it, they just build it in the backyard.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to say anything. They're going to do it. They'd throw their junk in it, right, and it'd work. And it was cheap enough for them to do it. They didn't need to get permits. It was just so you could do whatever you wanted. Today, no way. You can't do any of that. You can't park things in your yard. You can't park it on the side of the road. You can't just, if you want to add, a garage space, well, most people can't even afford it. That's so expensive. Right. So we have less land, we have higher real estate costs, we have more regulation. And in the exact same time frame, the cost of consumption has plummeted. Also, our ability to be mobile has increased. Right. Now, businesses have decentralized due to the internet, which fuels massively storage. I have a storage facility where about 30% of my tenants are businesses. So these things all accumulated to where self-storage moved from being this thing that some people would need or use to being actually more traditional infrastructure in the United States. And the more people understood it and got to know it and realized it, the more, I don't want to say popular because that's not the right word, the more important it became.
More mainstream.
More mainstream it became and more of a staple to America. Right now we have roughly 12% of the population uses storage at any given time. Now, in some markets that's higher.
Yeah, I thought it would have been much higher.
In Arizona, it's definitely higher because the growth. So as growth goes up, if you look at like, you may have 10% of the population that uses it, but if you're growing at 4% and you have 1 million people, that's 400,000 people, right? Or excuse me, if you have 1 million people, that's 40,000 people. Well, if you look at that 40,000 people though, it's not 10% because they're moving. So that's more like 75% of those people use storage. So all of a sudden you have 30,000 people that need storage units.
Yeah. And I think we see this quite a bit where like something will suggest to a homeowner that needs to move somewhere out, but they have nowhere to put their stuff. Like, we'll pay for a storage unit.
Yep, exactly.
We'll pay for a storage unit for 3 months, 6 months. Just put everything in there.
Yep. And
then you go move on with your life, and then we'll take it from there.
Bingo. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it kind of molded into this thing. And, it's kind of funny because I didn't like to tell people we invested in storage because it was looked down upon.
Right.
So
you're classless.
Exactly. It was. I literally had somebody that was like, okay, you're going from like a white collared professional where you're selling insurance. And they said, now you're becoming a slumlord. That's what they said. And they're like, why are you, it's below you. Like, what are you doing? Right.
Yeah.
And, so interesting how the world changes. And 10 years later, it was just everybody wanted it, and Wall Street moved in, and everybody needed it. But at the time, it's not what you would ever have thought of investing in.
Yeah, no, it's not nearly as sexy as it is today.
No.
So you just jumped right into it from like you were making good money selling insurance, and then you just did this as a side hustle.
Yeah.
And it was a seamless transition.
No, not seamless at all. So when we started, we were going in very small markets with very small assets. So you
didn't just start locally.
Oh, no, we didn't start locally at all. No, we couldn't afford anything in our local markets. Now, one of the things that I think people think, when you think commercial asset, the first thing you think is, oh, it's a skyscraper, things like that. We're talking about assets. You can buy a storage facility today that is less expensive than probably most of the duplexes in Phoenix.
Mm-hmm.
And you can get 50, 60 doors. So we were going into really rural markets, really small rural facilities that were cheap that we could buy. And then we were operating them that way. And we built, we bought a bunch of them, but we realized we couldn't go anywhere with it. It was...
Why not?
Because we couldn't, how we operated, how we ran in those markets, they were so small, we couldn't get very much higher prices. So they just kind of plateaued and they stagnated. So we sold them off because we didn't view that there was much of a future with it. And then we moved into bigger markets and went, instead of having more small ones, we concentrated on bigger ones. That made our margins go up because the operational part of it doesn't change that much. So you just add on doors. That means you get more revenue.
Mm-hmm.
So our margins got bigger, and that all of a sudden made it easier to scale. And we could charge higher prices in bigger markets because people made more money and people were moving. And so that's when we found we could go still buy these mom and pops that were doing the same thing they were doing in these teeny markets, but yet they had this bigger asset that had more doors and had more upside, and we could buy it. And the same thing we were doing on that small one yielded us way more on the big one, because now those small changes were leveraged across more doors, more revenue. And that's where we really hit our stride. And then from there, we were like, we're serious about this. This is what we're doing.
So how long were you doing self-storage before you quit your sales job?
So that's a funny story. Long time. I was actually, by the time I stopped, I was working for the third largest, at the time, brokerage firm in the United States. And I did not stop necessarily because I wanted to, because the money, I didn't want to take money out of my business. So we didn't have investors. So we were just pouring everything back into our companies, everything back into the real estate. What we would do is we'd buy it, we'd improve it, we'd refinance it, and take that money and go buy more. And
so you're just wealth accumulation.
Exactly.
Or asset accumulation.
Absolutely. So for me, my salary was too precious to leave. So I was working two jobs. I was building the side company, working a job. I actually became paralyzed overnight, and I was let go of my job. I lost my job on life because I was on life support in a hospital. And
so, for those watching, I would make the argument you don't look paralyzed.
No, I don't. Thank goodness. So I'm up walking. This was about 7 years ago now. I'm walking. My lower legs don't quite work. I'm not a runner. We'll just say that. But I'm walking without help, and I don't think anybody notices really. And so that's more than we ever thought would happen. But I got put on life support for months. I couldn't speak, nothing. I was just living on tubes. And then after that, I was sent home. I was home paralyzed at home. They just took me home, and I stayed there. My wife and my brother moved in with us to help take care of me. And I had lost my job, so we were living on the real estate, and that saved our financial life. And so that's why we're so. I'm so passionate, obviously, about it. And I'm so into it because of what it did for me and my family. And after that, it was like, okay, now I got to figure out what I'm going to do with my life. We don't know if I'll ever walk again. We don't know if I'll ever be normal again. I probably can't, work or do whatever we want. But I was so passionate about that, I just went all in, even more.
So I think before we continue,
yeah, go ahead.
What happened?
Yeah, so it's something called. Most people think that it was like an accident or something. It's something called Guillain-Barré. And Guillain-Barré is when your white blood cells, so you get triggered and your white blood cells attack your central nervous system, and they actually destroy all your nerves. So my brain could not send signals to my body. and my body lost the ability to take care of itself, do anything. I couldn't breathe.
So your immune system attacked your nerves.
Yeah.
So it's like is it one of those immune disorders?
Yeah. It's and it's hard for them to even really classify what it is because it happened one time. It is a trigger. I mean, something had to cause it, and then from there, they're like, okay, it'll never happen again. So it's not like we worry about it happening again. I don't need anything. There's nothing you can do for it at all. So they're like, we'll try to keep you alive, and then hopefully your nerves will just come back. There's no medicine. There's no nothing.
So there's nothing even to get the white blood cell back in line.
No, they do what's called like, I had like an IVIG, which all they do is just kill all the white blood cells. So hopefully it stops. And then, but that's it. That's all they can do. And then from there, they just try to keep you alive.
So you don't know what triggered it?
I do. Yes, actually, I do. I don't know if they'll take your podcast down so you can edit it out, I guess, if you want to, but it was a vaccine.
It was a vaccine?
Yeah.
Gotcha. So like an ordinary vaccine or vaccine for travel?
Yeah, it was a vaccine for travel. MMR. I was headed to Brazil. The most common one is the flu one. So there's different types of vaccines, right? But it is one that what they think happens is when it goes into the body, the body produces white blood cells to attack it. That's what vaccines are for. Then we build immunity, and the white blood cells attack. Right? That's the whole point. But because they think maybe because it's not natural that the white blood cells get confused, and then for some reason they don't know why, but then they say the nervous system is the threat. So then your body starts producing white blood cells at tens or hundreds of times normal. And your whole body, because your brain goes, your immune system goes, it's everywhere. It's all over the body. So we have to produce astronomical amount of white blood cells to try to kill this thing. And then it just goes, attacks your central nervous system, and it destroys it completely, rips it apart. And your brain can no longer send signals and communicate.
So did they destroy all the nerves, or did they like destroy like important parts?
All of them. My spinal column, everything. So I first started, I actually was totally fine, and I was starting to hurt, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And that night I was like, okay, I'm going to sit in the bathtub and soak my legs. My legs were hurting. And I went to get out of the bathtub, and my legs don't work. So my wife drugged me out, took me to the hospital. And then what happened was it just kind of went up the body, all the way up to my head. And so I was partially paralyzed even in the eyes. I could see the end of my hospital bed. But nothing below worked. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't speak. I was on tubes, so I couldn't speak for months. But my body then, having the nervous system damage, felt like it had been burned and crushed because my nerves were destroyed. So
there's no pain. It's just numb.
No, it was endless pain. I didn't sleep for over a month.
So you couldn't move, but it hurt like hell.
Yeah.
Even worse.
Felt like I was blown up.
Because usually when you're paralyzed, you can't feel anything.
Yes.
So not only could you not move,
I was on fire and dying 24/7. So I would sleep when I'd pass out.
Wow.
For weeks. I didn't sleep for a month.
Painkillers even work? Or
I was on, at one time, they had me on fentanyl, methadone, oxy, morphine, everything, and they could not stop it. And my wife was like, you got to give him more to try to stop it or whatnot. And they're like, we'll kill him. There's no way he could survive.
How were you conveying that you were in pain?
So we had a few ways they could basically
And I'm asking awfully personal questions.
Please do. No, I'm totally open about this, man. It doesn't bother me talking about it at all. So they could look at me and they could see like, holy, something's going on, right? But we had a plastic sheet, and the plastic sheet of paper that you could see through, where you'd had pictures on it. And I would look at the pictures to try to indicate, and then I would say yes or no by blinking. And so that's how I would communicate. But the vast majority of the time, they didn't know. So I could be sitting there just dying of pain and be like, you got to give me more medicine. But I can obviously communicate it. And people are sitting in the room, and I guess it didn't.
Yeah, really unless they asked you, there's no way to communicate. Yes. So we were talking before the show, you have 4 kids.
I do. We'd had our 4th.
So you had your 4th.
3 months. So my wife had just had our 4th child when I went into the hospital.
Yeah. So like, what were some of the thoughts and feelings you were experiencing
during that time,
through all this?
So when it first happened, obviously my wife didn't know what to tell the kids. And 2, we didn't know if I was even going to survive. So we didn't know if I was ever going to come off tubes. We didn't know if I'd even live. And there was no answers. So
that's the worst.
Yeah. It's like Is he going to be better? Is he going to get, we don't know. We'll see.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. We'll see, maybe. And so we went for a while where my wife's like, your dad is sick in the hospital, but they're taking care of him. And that was it, right? And the kids, we tried to keep the kids' lives as normal as possible. We didn't. She did. And then she would take care of me in the hospital. My brother came with me and my parents were there. But it got to a point where they're like, all right, he's either going to die or he may never get out ever. He'll live on tubes forever, or he'll eventually get out, but we don't know when. So you got to tell the kids sometime. So then finally she came. We don't have answers. It's already been weeks. So she just had to bring the kids in and show them. And that was probably the worst moment of my life, was seeing when my daughter walked into the room and looked at her dad hooked to tubes, and she didn't want to get near me. It was terrifying, obviously, to her. Her dad, who used to be this, great, powerful guy, Superman, is there and nothing, just nothing. Can't speak, can't do anything. And that was one of the hardest things ever. It was hard not seeing my children, obviously, but then it was even worse seeing them because you could see it in their face and their eyes. Now, eventually, they'd come and visit me all the time, and it was like, oh, I'm glad they're here, right? Yeah. The best thing that ever happened to us was that we had our fourth child, and because he was only months old, right? I mean, I'm in there, and he's 4 or 5 months. They would lie him on the pillow next to me, and he'd play with my lips, and I'd move my lips to try to play with him. And that's how I played with my children. So I was actually very fortunate that we had our little baby, because he didn't know and he didn't care. He had no concept that dad's paralyzed. He just dad, and he was happy to be there and play with me, as I couldn't speak or do anything, but I'd move my lips and try to eat his hands, and he liked that. And so that was probably it borderline saved me and gave me sanity, because I was so excited to see him. He didn't care. There was no judgment. There was no look when everybody else came in, and it was shocking to see me. And I could obviously see that. I knew. So it was a combination of, while you're in that state, first of all, the pain was so overwhelming that most of the time it was just out of it. As they got better control of it, they never got it to go away. It still doesn't today. So I'm on pain meds, everything else like that, but I'm in pain 24/7. And so they got it more under control to where I think I could think normal, right? Things like that. And then that's when all the other stuff comes in, and you're sitting there going, okay, like, why are they, because you lose all your senses. Now, if I'm going too deep into this,
there's no such thing as too deep in this show.
All right. So when you lose your senses, weird things start to happen. So a lot of people, we forget. We know we're standing on Earth because your feet are telling your brain you're standing on Earth. You know it's cold outside, right? You see things, you touch things, and all of these senses actually build the world around us. It's not just your eyes. That's not how your brain works.
Right.
So when you take all those away, things get weird. Like, time gets weird. You don't really understand necessarily where you're at. And then you have things called like ICU delirium and stuff. So it was this constant managing and thinking through and trying to understand and communicating with people through blinking, and people would come visit, right? And it was so strange, but I didn't know how long I'd been there. For me, the experience was years. That's how my brain interpreted it. And still to this day, it was years in my head. And when I look back on it too, it was really hard at first, because I didn't know why they were keeping me there. Like, I didn't know why they weren't letting me die. And it was like, this is a sick joke, you guys. Like, what are you doing, right?
Yeah, why are you torturing me?
Why are you torturing me? And so it was kind of this survival mode. Every time I opened up my eyes, which was obviously from pain, it would pass out pain, open up from pain, and it was like, oh, I'm back in hell. And then it was, I don't know how long I've been here. I don't know why this is still going on. And then it was survival mode. Yeah. So for the first quite a while, that's all really it was in the head. It was just survival mode, nothing more.
So in some ways, I think your wife should be here, because she's the superhero here.
100% she is. Yeah. 100%.
So what was...
I just lied there. So
Yeah, I mean,
She was the one that was,
you were in a
keeping it
hellhole
together.
of a vacation.
Yep, exactly.
So when you've got time and you think you're on your deathbed,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts about what you're doing here on this planet, your business, your family, and all those other things?
Yeah.
You spent countless weeks going back and forth with a homeowner only to lose a deal because the seller changed their mind, another wholesaler made an unreasonable offer, or what the seller needs from the sale, you just can't pay. Now imagine you've got the ultimate control on a property that you just locked up, meaning you're on title and every decision has to go through you, eliminating virtually every external threat. That's why the installment method was created. Through installment payments, you have full control of the property as your name is now on the title. Any decision the seller wants to make now has to be approved by you. No longer can they pull out equity, go with another buyer, or change their mind. Imagine combining the best of creative finance with the flexibility of marketing the property on the MLS to collect the most amount of revenue possible, all while having total control of the property. This is just the tip of the iceberg. The concept here is simple, but implementing is challenging. So visit wholesale2024.com to learn more so that you'll never have another deal blow up.
So, for a while afterwards, I even asked my wife, I'm like, I wonder if the hospital broke me, and she's like, it didn't, but it changed you. And that's right. It did. Mm-hmm. It did change me. And it changed me in ways that I wasn't suspecting. Like, I think a lot of people think you go through something like that and there's an outcome, like certain things become not important. And what I found was things that became not important was like my kids didn't annoy me afterwards. Like things that would have bugged me prior to, like I became much more affectionate with my children. It was like, nope, I'm holding you. I'm going to give you kisses. You're going to like it. I don't care, right?
You don't have a say in this.
You don't have a say in this. I'm like, I am going to love every single second that I'm with you. And it was like, I didn't necessarily care if they did things. And there became a delineation where you're either doing something wrong or annoying me. If it's annoying, I don't care at all. Mm-hmm. Like whatever. And so I changed as a father the way that I viewed them. They became much more precious to me. Mm-hmm. And that sounds bad because they were precious before, but not.
You didn't appreciate them.
I didn't appreciate it like every second, like it was. They were not something that was a task. They weren't something that was like I got to do. No, not at all. It was just wow. This is amazing. Like that you're even here. Mm-hmm. And then other things that changed was I went a lot bigger when I got out of the hospital. So a lot of people are like, oh yeah, work wasn't important, right? Things like that. And it's true, work became really not important in the hospital. I didn't even think about it. Didn't matter. Like I'm either going to die or not. Like it was irrelevant. Mm-hmm. But when I got out, all of a sudden the person who I was when I went in died. Mm-hmm. And when I was sitting there watching the snowfall, and I was going to go home, and I was going to get to be Christmas morning. They were going to let me visit my kids, and before they took me back to the hospital, so they were going to assist it. And I mean, the last time I went in, I was planting trees out in the backyard. So I'm watching the snowfall, and I was so excited, right, to go home. And it was a realization at that point, though. I'm going to go home, and there's two people are going to go home: AJ in the wheelchair or somebody different. Now, that didn't mean that I wasn't in a wheelchair, but it meant I was either going to identify as this thing mm-hmm. or something else. I don't know what that thing is anymore. I'm not me. Mm-hmm. I can't do anything that I used to do. I don't even really know how to be a dad. I don't know how to be a husband. I don't know how to do anything. I don't even know what I can do because I couldn't do anything. But it was like I have to be something else.
Right.
And so there was this idea that when I got out, everything that I did, I wanted to do way bigger. Mm-hmm. So if I was going to spend my time doing anything, it better be awesome. So out of my wheelchair, I started 3 different companies. We scaled our assets, and it was like I went harder than before, mm-hmm. which surprised people. I think a lot of people thought I would have laid off the gas. Like mm-hmm. it would have been like, oh no, you're going to enjoy your time or something like that.
Yeah, new leash on life.
I've enjoyed my time. I lied around, right? Instead, my time became more important. Mm-hmm. So if I had to choose to do something, the outcome of it had to be bigger, and it had to be worth it, mm-hmm. or there was no reason to do it at all. So
kind of goes back to mom's adage of it's worth doing.
Yeah, exactly. And so that became really important and big. And so everything that I started to do, it was, no, it's going to be huge, or why do it?
Go big or go home. That's my motto.
100%.
So as you're talking about all this, I'm thinking about FMLA.
Yeah.
How were they able to fire you legally?
So how it works is it's not firing, it's you're letting go. And there's good reasons for it too. And I think people, they hear it and they're like, that was so bad of them, everything. Like, no, not at all. Because I couldn't get disability. If you're an employee, I couldn't work. They couldn't employ me. I wasn't doing anything.
Right.
And two, they actually stop you from being able to go through a normal cycle. Because at the time, I could have been on disability for the rest of my life. We had no idea, which actually is funny. I went on disability and I immediately lost my disability because my real estate made too much money, which that's a whole other story. That ticked me off. I'm like, okay, well, why did I ever do that? But so it was, I guess I went on to disability and parted way. But it was a termination of employment. Everything else is done. You're on disability. You're gone. And that was strange because your identity in what you do is so much, and that had just been eradicated.
Right.
And it was, thank you, bye, left, done, over. Never, those people were gone, never saw them again. And it was a little shock to the system where it was like, oh, wow, I really didn't matter at all in this context.
Yeah.
And that was, I mean, clients didn't, it was just over.
Yeah.
And none of it, as if none of it ever even happened.
Yeah. We're all replaceable.
Yes, very much so. It was the most humbling experience of my life, considering I couldn't even go to the bathroom. So I laid naked on a bed and people rolled me over to bathe me and to take care of me. So that was another thing that was very good about it. I mean, I started doing things like social media and podcasting, things like that I would have never done before because I didn't care. It was like, I mean, I've been lying in a bed, going to the bathroom on myself and having other people bathed me with rags for months. Like it just, now I'm in a wheelchair sitting here, like can hardly do anything. So pride just was gone. And that was very liberating. And it's interesting that over 7 years, how much that creeps back in. Like, it's like, I would have thought that I could have staved it off, but it doesn't. Like now you post something on Motion, oh, is this stupid? Or should I say that thing right? I actually love telling the story because when I do, it reminds me, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't matter. And that's very freeing.
But all those thoughts that are part of the human experience. They come back.
They really are. They come back. And you just can't ward them off. It's something you have to remind yourself, constantly. And that it's nobody really cares that much. It's not that big of a deal. It's not important. And you should say what you want. You should be open and you should, the risk of embarrassment should never be something that ever stops you, yet it's probably the number one thing that stops everybody.
Yeah. One thing I say a lot to people is you should stop taking yourself so seriously. You're not that important.
You're not that important.
You're not.
Really not.
Yeah.
You're not that important. It was funny because that was the one thing I was like, I was looking out the window and you saw all the cars moving and everything else. And it was like, you know what? Like nobody knows, nobody cares. The world will move on. And it's outside a few select people. That's it. And two, even them, they'll get over it too. You're really just not that important.
Right.
And a lot of people, I think, don't like that, but I think it's actually quite freeing to understand that. I
mean, a lot fewer things I have to worry about when I'm making decisions.
Yes, a lot fewer. I completely agree. But that's hard because we start thinking that we start thinking that we matter more and that certain things are so dangerous or lost. And it's like, we can't separate those things. And that prohibits us like chains grabbing us and holding us down because we start to think that, well, if I fail, that means something about me and other people will then see me or think that I'm that thing. And I don't want that. So I'm not going to do. And the truth is nobody cares.
All right.
And the failure is nothing. It doesn't even really matter. In fact, it actually helps you grow. And nobody cares. Nobody will judge you. Nobody thinks anything of you. You're just not that important. So the very thing holding you down is actually the very thing that doesn't matter.
One of the things when I started this podcast was, we're over 300 episodes in,
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm going to do 10 episodes. If it completely bombs, no one would even know.
No one will know. No one will know. No one will care.
Yeah. No one's going to be like, can you please, Steve, try that podcast? What an idiot. Right?
Yeah. Nobody.
Nobody knows.
No.
So you go into the hospital.
Yep.
And along the way, you've already accumulated
yes
multiple assets.
Yes.
So 2 questions.
Yep.
How did those assets do without you, and what did those assets do for you?
They made more money and were worth more when I got out of the hospital. My job had been gone and destroyed. My assets made more money and were worth more when I got out. One of the most powerful lessons I ever learned. And so then from there, my wife we didn't have to sell her home. My wife didn't have to leave me paralyzed in a bed with 4 kids to go get a job to try to take care of us. Because, even if you're like, oh, I got disability is a fraction that you make. It would not have taken care of us. It would have not have done anything. All the growth of the kids, it wouldn't. No, it doesn't work, right? So, we would have had to dramatically change our life. And it would have been so disruptive. And frankly, I don't think it would have let me heal, because not only the stress of it, but I wouldn't have been able to get the care and the help that I needed. So, and I don't mean by medical professions. I mean like a home. Like you just all of a sudden we're survival mode, right? You can't do it. That changes the way your body even works.
Yeah. So you have a lot more stress.
Yeah.
Besides, I need to get better. Now you're worried and you're wallowing in misery.
Yes. So it allowed me to really say, hey, let's focus up. Let's get better. And then 2, be proactive instead of reactive about building a new life, which that helped me magnify then everything moving forward. Yeah.
So you were a successful sales guy. When we were talking about like successful, like how much were you bringing it in?
On average, $200,000 to $300,000 a year.
And I say this for context because there's like this evolution, right? Like we all read Rich Dad Poor Dad, or a lot of us read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and we think I want to get out of the rat race.
Yes.
Right. And so get out of the rat race. Like, okay, maybe you do, instead of working a W-2 job, you're self-employed doing sales.
Yes.
Right. Like there's self-employed business owner kind of like transition entrepreneur deal. And what I see there is we just join a faster rat race.
100%.
Where instead of us running around in circles, we all get in Lamborghinis
and move forward.
And we go faster. So it's a much nicer rat race.
A much nicer rat race. But it doesn't end. It doesn't end.
There's always like, well, what's AJ doing over there? Right? Yeah. What's he doing over there? How many units is he doing? How many assets is he on? How many doors is he on?
Yeah. Like I had a group, I was literally telling this to yesterday. It's like, they're like, oh, you own this stuff. It must be nice. Well, if I had that, I'd get that. And I'm like, what you have to do is a fraction of what I do. I'm like, you need $300,000 to invest. I need $150 million I need to go get to invest. Like my problems are 100x what you perceive as a problem. The only difference is I know how to do it and I don't mind it because I've got the skills and I'm going to go do it. So I don't even perceive it necessarily as problems. It's just part of it. And that's a huge mental block for people because you didn't get it because you had it. You have it because you went out and got it and you have to keep going. It doesn't, not even that you have to keep going. I don't want to say that, but it's part of the process. They're not separate things. It's not it's not an ending point. That's not how it works.
Right.
You don't win, right? You create, you progress, you grow. It's part of it. And so many people, they don't want the things that it actually takes to progress and to be better. And they think that I'll get to a point where I won't have to do anything or those things won't matter.
Right.
And I wanted financial freedom, and I viewed financial freedom so I could do more, not so I could do less. I didn't want a fixed income sitting at a retirement home or a fixed income sitting on the beach not doing anything. That to me, that's not financial freedom. I view financial freedom very differently. I wanted financial freedom to do whatever I wanted,
right?
Not to not do anything. And the idea of being and fulfilling who you are is that you can create and you can become more and you can do more. That's the fun of it. That's the purpose of it.
Yeah.
It is not to do nothing. There's only so much Netflix you can watch before you hate yourself.
Yeah, no, there is a point where it all becomes boring. So you're talking about like, you don't want to do the things or you don't want the things. So can you elaborate on that? Like,
yeah, absolutely. I don't want to be in an uncomfortable position. I don't want to fail. I don't want to put myself in a position that makes me have to either work or makes me have to do certain things that I'm uncomfortable with. And that's not how life works.
Yeah.
Instead, you need to be comfortable being uncomfortable. You need to be comfortable solving problems that you don't know the answers to. You need to be comfortable failing. If you can get those 3 things down, you can do anything.
Yeah. We were doing a call this morning inside a whale club, and one of the guys said, it was Cal Arnold, he said, most of us suffer in silence because we're trying to find a way to avoid doing the things
Yes.
we know we have to do.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah. I look at it today as everybody, so me and my 2 partners, we built multiple businesses and sold them. We worked and put all our money into it. We actually did it the hard way. Looking back on it, it was like, wow, we really didn't know. There was no resources. There was no books. There was no podcasts. There was no social media.
No, it was a terrible class asset.
Figure it out. Terrible class asset. We're trying to figure this thing out. We worked 10 times as hard as we even had to. But we learned. And now I know, okay, there's a lot easier ways to do it. And then once we learned and figured that out, our portfolio exploded. We doubled it in a fraction of the time that it took before, right? But I was also, though, we could explode it because I was already comfortable doing the things that it took. And then I did it smarter and better. And then it was much easier to grow.
Yeah. Going back to, you started in the early 2000s. Let's see, we have Rich Dad Poor Dad. There's a book. We got a bunch of Robert Allen books.
Yeah.
Right. But there was definitely no Bigger Pockets. There was no podcasting.
Nope. No social media.
And no social media.
Nope.
So did you guys have at least a self-storage association?
So there was a self-storage association. It was teeny, and it was kind of a joke at the time too. And so we would go that once a year, and we would try to learn, okay, well, maybe you could paint something here, or maybe you could make something. But I mean, it was pitiful, to say the least.
Yeah. So really, it was just
Learning by
bootstrap
doing.
and just fail forward.
Yep.
Gotcha. Now, you mentioned that you started a few businesses while you're in your wheelchair.
Yeah. So when I got out, I started private equity side. So I currently we have our private equity syndication company that does storage. We have our storage management company, but I also have software companies. We have an architecture company. We have a debt brokerage side now. I also have our educational platform that we do now as well. We have, so I'm sure there's all these other things that I'm thinking. What we did is I built an ecosystem of companies out to do the thing that we were doing. And it was, well, if we need something, instead of sitting around and let's just solve the problem. So I would just solve the problem. We'd create a business to do the thing. My wife started a school that was it's an entrepreneur investing school that she built because it was like, we just got tired. It was like, if we see a problem, we're just going to fix it because we don't have enough time. We don't want to waste life. And that just kind of became the default mode of operation afterwards.
Have you started a self-storage association?
So it's funny, we actually started the largest self-storage co-op in the world. And we were founding members, we built it up and it's store local. Then we built that into a national brand that we use. So
what does that mean?
So the national brand, when you look at storage, customer acquisition is like the most important thing that you can do. 85% of all customers we find or come to us from mobile. So that means that your domain ranking and your ability to capture those customers is probably the most important thing that you could even do. So we built a co-op where we could share resources and act like a REIT or a big boy, right? Well, then we learned that was so important. We turned the store local into a national brand where people could use it, but because more people were using it, you would get much higher domain authority and you would rank higher so you could acquire the customers just like you could if you were a huge, big company, which small guys, and by small, I mean, you're talking under 500 stores, which that's like $1 billion company. Anything under that's small, right? We're at north of 350 million and we're small. So because we can't compete with the REITs and the big boys. So we use that and now everybody can get the benefits of being big. That's why we built it.
So it's like a giant collaboration.
Yeah.
Where we can all chip money in.
Yep.
Invest in SEO ranking.
Yep.
To source leads for our deal.
And the brand name you license out, and so you can use the brand. So Google recognizes it as this huge company.
Are there limitations to like how many per market or?
So what we did is kind of like a franchise model where if it's in 3-mile radius of somebody else, you need to get permission, but that's it.
Gotcha. Okay. So I'm looking at this and I say, wow, self-storage, this seems like a no-brainer. I'm going all in. What's the first thing I'm doing?
So the first thing is self-storage isn't like other asset classes. I think the biggest thing is the learning curve is so steep. When I wrote my first self-storage book, it became a bestseller like immediately, which I was shocked by. But that's because there was no information on storage. And so it was like...
When did it come out?
So that was, 5 years ago now. Jeez, I think it was 5 years ago now. It is called Growing Wealth in Self-Storage. By AJ Osborne. The second book's actually coming out here in June. But it was a playbook. I'm like, this is exactly what you got to do.
Growing Wealth in Self-Storage.
Yeah.
So if you're listening to this, get that book. And then the upcoming book is going to be called?
It's Growing Wealth in Self-Storage, but number two. It's huge. It's like a novel. It's like 400 pages. So,
Okay.
But it's like, it's everything you would need, right? And was so popular, though it did so well because people are like, I want to do this, but it's so weird, right? It's so different. So the first thing about storage is any asset class, it doesn't matter. If you don't understand the value of the thing, you can't do it. So then you got to figure out, all right, how do I value it? And how it's valued and what it can be will depend on operations, right? Things like that. So it's the learning curve, I think, that is the first thing that if you want to get in the asset class, like storage, people that invest in storage, we're not real estate investors, right? I'm a storage guy.
Yeah.
That's what I do. I own a storage company. I don't invest in storage. I own a storage company. And that's storage guys are storage guys. That's what we do. Why? Because it's so unique. We like it. And we build it out for it. So
is this kind of like McDonald's where like you run a business, but the value's in the real estate? Or is this?
Yeah, it kind of is. And, the great thing about real estate is the better you run the business, you increase net income, which is applied to a cap rate and increases the value.
Right.
So it's a great lever to create mass equity.
Right.
So.
Gotcha. Okay. So step one, understand.
Yes.
The business.
Yep. Understand the business of storage.
Gotcha. Okay. So I understand the business of storage. I read your book.
Yep.
Consume some content.
Yep.
I'm good here.
Yep.
What happens after that?
So the number one thing is you got to figure out where you're going to play. So storage is divided up. I view it in basically 3 different buckets. You have size, which is under 50,000 square feet net rentable. Now, somebody may say, that's ginormous, right? 30,000 net rentable square feet. Well, in storage, it's not like multifamily, right? 30,000 square feet, that may be a couple $100,000 depending on where you're at. So it's not applied like that. 50 to 100,000 net rentable square feet, that is mid-size, and then 100,000 net rentable square feet plus is big. Now, we use net rentable square feet as opposed to doors because it doesn't make sense because in storage, doors are all sorts of different sizes. So that doesn't really tell you anything. Now, once you figure out, all right, under 50,000, you're dealing more in automation. It's more manless, touchless system automation. You get bigger, then you have like managers on site, things like that. So understanding where you want to play in that. And then markets. Are you really small markets, mid-sized markets, or big markets? Once you understand those 2 things, you can figure out now your buy box, what I want to buy, and what the strategy is behind it. And then from there, you can source and target your acquisitions, and you know what needs to be done within that model of it. It's not that it's complex, but it's just, I guess, it's just different than most people think about.
So I'm a W-2 guy, working a good job, making 150,000 a year.
Yep.
Which would you recommend?
Start small and grow from there.
Yeah.
It's the easiest way.
Smaller footprint, smaller city?
Yes. Smaller market, smaller footprint. And one of the main reasons is we do a lot of seller finance deals, things like that, because they don't have access. Big capital doesn't want to go down there. You get higher cap rates, which if you don't understand what cap rates mean, that's how we view, it's kind of how we talk about value in commercial real estate. The higher a cap rate isn't price. That means the lower the prices. So you get a better deal on it because they can't sell it to institutional capital.
You get better cash on cash return.
Yes. And they also we can do things like seller finance. They'll work with you, right? So it makes it way easier for a beginner to actually buy and do it. It also means in those small markets, they're generally the worst run facilities. So there's more upside and potential on them, right?
Right.
And it's easier to just handle and do. It's way less doors. There's way less even going on. And very simple things can have a really big upside. So you can be successful and it's way easier with way less risk, right? And then from there, you can figure it out and move up.
So on the flip side, I'm listening to the show. I'm doing 3 to 7 wholesale deals a month. I'm making pretty good money, and I want to diversify.
Yes.
Which way do you recommend then, as far as footprint and location?
So I'd recommend more of the mid-sized markets. The bigger you go, the better the margins generally are. And now, the bigger you go, though, the level of complexity kind of goes up. Once again, if you're going from 20,000 square feet to 40,000 square feet, it doesn't really go up. If you're going from 20,000 to 85,000, it does.
Right.
You're talking about the difference of 80 doors to 400, right? So you may need to have a manager on site. Now, that's when you need to decide if you're going to do it. Are you going to run it? Are you going to hire somebody else to run it? Or are you just going to partner with somebody and go in on the deal? If you're jumping straight into mid or big deals, you should probably think about, if you're going to do it yourself, that's fine, but you shouldn't go about it alone. I don't ever suggest that. Or you need to get a property management company that specializes in self-storage, if you can, in those markets, or you just team up with somebody and do it that way.
What are the biggest challenges you see from people getting into self-storage?
They think it's easy. They say, "Oh, there's no toilets. It's roll up doors."
It looks pretty easy when I watch it. When I'm on social media, this is
it's
easy.
simple, right? You just buy it, and it's just like they just pay you, right? And so that's the biggest struggle. That's the biggest thing. We find people, they buy it, a year later, I want out of this. And they're like, "Well, I thought it was passive." And I'm like, "You've obviously never done real estate before. That's not how real estate works."
Like you said, it's a business.
It's a business. I mean, if you buy a mid-sized facility, you have 600 tenants that turn over monthly. Like, we view it as like a retail. I sell insurance. I sell tenant insurance. We get premiums back. We sell boxes. We got people coming out all the time. We need to be selling people every single day. And then our prices are changing every single day. We're managing all of it all the time. And then we're optimizing occupancy and revenue. So we do things like dynamic pricing, like an airline does, where everybody that's sitting on that plane paid a different price than the person sitting next to them. We do the same thing. All the units are priced differently.
Right.
But once again, you got to be managing. You got to understand those things.
Does your software do all that?
Yeah. And so we look at it and you say, all right, there's no toilets. Nobody's living in there. It's much more passive. But then at the same time, though, what you don't have in real estate problems as much, you have more on business operations side.
Yeah. What's your software called?
So we have Tenant Inc., which is a software called Hummingbird, which is a property management system that you can use. We also have a revenue management tool that you can go to Self-Storage Income and check that out.
Well, I'm just asking this because, the guy that founded Priceline, we got a chance to meet him, Jeff Hoffman, billionaire, obviously. And like his claim to fame, his second claim to fame. His first one was he invented the kiosks at the airport. His second one was dynamic pricing for the hotels, right? Because for the longest time, they all pay the same. But once they figured out Priceline, and said, hey, based off demand, how many people are on the website? How many inquiries we've had? Here's what the events like. Here's the price to reduce vacancy cost. Right. And so it's fascinating. So like I was asking that just to see curious if you had that in your software, because if you do, it makes the software incredibly valuable.
Very valuable.
And then I guess so we're talking about the challenges here. One thing we haven't talked about Cedar Creek Capital.
Yeah.
So I could be very interested in self-storage.
Yeah.
But there's this other part I need to be good at, which is money.
Yes.
Talk to me. I want to get into self-storage. I want to start raising capital. What do I need to do? What do I need to know to start raising capital?
Yeah. So there's a few things. Now, partnerships is a core principle of real estate. Always has been, and always will be, especially in commercial real estate. Commercial real estate is not done generally by yourself because they're so big, right? Now, when you look at the raising capital, a lot of people put the cart before the horse. So they're like, well, I don't have access to capital. And I'm like, nobody does until they have something to sell. So how can you say that nobody will give you money when you're not selling anything? So don't worry about the money. Go get a deal. Once you have a deal, the money will come. But you're worrying about money because nobody will give you money, but you don't have anything for them to give it to. So how do you know? That doesn't make sense to me, right? It's like, I want $1 million. And you say, well, what for? Nothing. Give me $1 million. Nobody's going to do that. So of course nobody will give you money, right?
Yeah, only your grandma, maybe.
Maybe your grandma. And so, but if I come to you and I'm like, hey, I can get you 200% return this year. I need $1 million. You're going to say, take 10, right? So like a lot of people raising capital, they think I need the money before I do real estate. No, you need the real estate to get the money. Switch it around. Learn about the asset, learn about value, learn what makes a good deal, go find a good deal. The money will come.
How will the money come? Like, so I've got this incredible
you got this great deal.
Right?
Now,
I've got this thing. It's a 12 cap.
Yep.
In Phoenix.
Yep. Oh,
I'm calling AJ.
You call me. Yep. And done. It's over. Done. Nobody, don't call anybody else, everybody. Call me with your 12 cap in Phoenix. You got all the money you need. But so the first thing that I think a lot of people do is they're waiting for the magical man behind the curtain when it's actually just the people around you.
Yeah.
So networking, you're like, well, I don't know anybody or whatnot. And I'm like, you do. You just don't realize you do. It may not be directly one, but it is a second order people. Now, there is entire associations, meetups, everything else. The money's there. So local real estate meetups, it's huge. You have people that go to local real estate meetups just for that functionality. You have entire forums, you have entire webs. You need to, though, be out. So you need to be out. You need to tell people what you do, why you do it, what the value proposition is. And then you need to be making connections with those people. Now, there's also professional people that allocate capital, right? You have everything from hard money lenders to you have equity people that's all they do. They come in, they place capital and take it. So whether you cultivate a network of people that you just know, right, and things like that, or you go out and pay or have people go get you equity, they do that. You can actually pay somebody to go get you money for equity in the deal. They get a piece of that equity.
Right.
So either way you can do it. But the first thing you need to do is you need to be talking to people. You need to know what you're doing, why you're doing it, go meet people. Networking is so important. And online and, so many people are like, well, I don't have money, but you don't tell anybody what you're doing. You don't tell anybody that you need it. You don't have a deal. And that doesn't make sense. Like, get out there. Like, go talk to your uncle, go talk to your neighbor, go talk to, and two, I'm not telling you to sell people. Like people are like, I don't want to ask people for money. And I'm like, I never ask anybody for money. I never go to somebody and say, hey, will you give me $500,000? No. Hey, well, what you up to? I'm like, oh, dude, I just got this killer deal. Like, it's like, oh, I've wanted to do real estate. You should look at it. I mean, it's an awesome deal. I'm like, sure. Can I give you 200,000? Okay. I don't go with a tin cup begging people for money.
Yeah.
And I think that's the largest fear from it. And I didn't want to take capital, by the way. I didn't take it. We didn't take capital for 15 years because I was afraid of it. It was scary to me. And I had somebody once tell me, and they're like, wait, so AJ, you're doing these deals. We can see your returns. We can see the deals you have. And you don't want to allow other people to get into those deals because you don't want to ask somebody for money. They go, but it's not that you're not asking people for money. You're not allowing people the opportunity.
Yeah.
And I think once you change that frame of reference, it's easy to talk to people. Yeah. And it's easy to go online forums and talk about deals and what do we think about this. Make it more organic and connect with the people that are in the space, doing the thing, learn from them, but don't think of it as asking them for money, right? That's the first major barrier that you have.
It's a mental barrier.
It's a major mental barrier. Network, don't ask people for money.
Yeah, I think put another way was, if you have access to investments where someone can make 20% of their money and you don't let people know, your insecurities are causing you to be selfish.
100%.
And you're not letting other people around you win.
Yeah. Well, and, I was always like, well, what if I mess up or what if they lose money? And they're like, well, or you don't think they're an adult. You don't think that they can make their own decisions. And they're like, have you ever done that before? And I'm like, no. They're like, you've never lost a deal. I'm like, no. You've never not made money? No. And they're like, so you don't think that somebody can make their own choice and you're afraid of something that's never happened because there's the potential of it happening. And they're like, that's kind of insane. And I'm like, yeah, when you put it that way, you're right. It is a little ridiculous that fear exists.
Yeah. Well, it's good. As an investor, I'm happy to know that you have that fear.
Yes.
But also happy to know that you've never
Yeah.
never lost. So I've got the deal.
Yeah.
I've got the money.
Mm-hmm.
Someone needs to operate this deal.
Yep.
So what do I do there?
So operations, this is the big thing with storage. The operator will determine the outcome in self-storage. The market doesn't determine the outcome nearly as much in storage as the operator does. That's different in other asset classes. Like if you have a multifamily unit, you and another multifamily of the exact same quality, the market's going to price those units.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, your 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom, or 2-bedroom, whatever it is $1,200. And it's going to vary very little. The market's determine what that is. This is not how it works in storage.
Really?
Right? My 10 by 10, I'm going to sell it at this price for this day because I have 5 of them, and somebody else may be selling it lower. So the prices don't work like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it changes very quickly. Like you can go all over the city. Prices will be 150 here, 100 there, 85 there, 200 there. You don't see that in other asset classes,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the self-storage operator will have so much to do with the long-term value. And if you're learning and you're starting small, right, it's a great opportunity to learn and to grow and to do it, to put the work in. But if not, you need to focus on who that property management system, who that property manager is, or who you're partnering up with, because that will make or break it.
Yeah. So the customer service is absolutely
huge.
Critical.
And what kind of technology they have? Do they understand the space? Can they understand the delicate balance between occupancy and revenue? How are they doing sales? What is the amount of percentage that they're getting back from tenant insurance? And all of these things. It makes a big deal in storage.
So a moment ago, we were talking about you got to always be selling. So you got all these different ancillary services.
Yes.
What are all the different ancillary services?
Yeah. So we do everything from moving trucks to we provide like dump stations to electricity to boxes to we even like cart things to rental trailers to wraps to locks to insurance to specialty usage like conference rooms, office space. Like there's a lot.
How important is the salesperson in that role?
Very important. Very important. We analyze it like a sales team. I look at how many leads come in, what our close rate is. We look at when they were called back, how often somebody answered the phone. I mean, it is a sales part, and we analyze it like that. How many calls came in? How many did you take? Why was your close rate lower? Why was it higher? What time of the day did they come in? Why did this person not get called? Like that call come in, it should have been answered immediately. Mm-hmm. Why did it wait 4 rings? I mean, it's sales.
Yeah.
Like,
so, I mean, it's a true business all the way through.
Oh, yeah, you better treat it like one, yeah.
So one of the things I've heard in talking to my multifamily friends is the thing that scares them about storage is that there's no limitations to how many you can build. So like...
Yes, that's the number one fear.
Okay, so...
It should be.
So talk to me about that.
So storage is much more susceptible to oversupply than other asset classes. Now, the reason being is the barriers of entry are lower. So that's really good for beginners and everything. But at the same time, multifamily, if you want to put 500 units in Phoenix in multifamily, what's that going to cost you? Like tens of millions, right? You can put 500 units in Phoenix for $5 million for storage. And you can put, I'm building in Phoenix right now, and I'm putting 1,500 units, 200,000 net rentable square feet.
Yeah.
Like a lot, right? And so you can have somebody like me come in and be like, I'm going to add 10% of, to the market right now. And that is the biggest fear because then rates and occupancies can get hit. Now, storage though has, it can do that and survive it. We have big margins and the default rate is a fraction of what multifamily is, but that is the biggest problem in storage is oversupplied, and you need to be able to analyze and know if a market is oversupplied or going to be. It is, like I tell people, if you could do that one thing, if you would know if there's demand, the smartest guy in storage in the world will fail in a market where demand is lower or weak. The stupidest person in the world will be successful in a market where demand is strong and moving up. So be the smartest person in the highest demand, and then it's money, right? But I call it my margin of stupidity. That's literally what I call it. I go, guys, we have to have a margin of stupidity. When I look at the market, I have to be stupid and still be successful. If not, don't do the deal. And that's all demand.
So then are you looking at, one of the metrics I think is always funny to see in the slideshow is the cost of U-Haul in each direction. Is that something you look at?
So it is. The migration patterns are very important to us.
Yeah.
And how sustainable they are, why they're going and where they're going. So it's two sides. We have the market, which speaks to that. Are people coming in? Are they coming out? Then we have the storage market, which how much square footage is there? What is the occupancy and rates? And is more storage coming? And so those two things you have to look at. And the storage market can actually destroy a market that has high demand because lots of people are moving there. They can still overbuild it. Then you can have an area that doesn't have a lot of demand because not a lot of people are moving there, but nobody built storage, so demand's sky high.
Right.
So you got to be really careful because they're both just as important as the other one.
How do you measure demand?
So we look at demand in two ways. We look at the total amount of units and square footage on the market, but then we also look at how the relationship is to occupancy and rates. And what I mean by that is occupancy isn't good enough. You can have high occupancy because you can drop your overall rates in half. That doesn't mean you have high demand. That means you're giving things away for free, which people do. And so I want to see occupancies be stabilized and rents going up and the occupancy to not have an inverse relationship to rates. Rates are going up, but occupancy is not going down. That means there's good demand. And then I also want to make sure that the supply is not changing dramatically. So if I'm in a market and somebody's going to come and build a huge facility, that's going to dramatically change the supply. So I don't know what the demand may be after there. That's going to make me very, very nervous. I do not want to be in a market where a lot of supply is coming on. Most people, and if you're in a small market, no supply. I don't want any new supply coming on. And I'll go to the county and we ask them, what land's approved? Has anyone put in permits? Are there any plans to build storage in this area? If there are, and if we're in a small market, that basically kills the deal. We won't even do it.
That's your due diligence.
Yep.
So I'm looking at here, $350 million in self-storage, over 11,000 doors. How much stress?
I mean, we've got a lot of employees, so it's stress, man. I stress about different things, right? I'm more stressed about the growth. So the stress that I have is when the markets change. So at where I focus on levels, it's like, okay, how are we getting money? What are the new deals we're doing? How are those things coming in, right? As far as the management and operations go, the stress comes down to how are we performing and our markets aligning with that, right? But on a day-to-day basis, I don't know what's happening at the facilities anymore. I used to know everything, right? I used to do it. I go shovel snow. But today, I don't know. I'm looking at broad trends and I'm looking at things like that. And it's storage. We can usually see those things quick because things are moving, right? So we can get the data. And we
get real-time data.
Yeah. And there's a busy season and a slow season of storage, and that can really set the tone and the way that it goes.
So I am not as educated in this space. So 350 million, 11,000 doors, like, the REITs, I imagine, are much larger.
Yes, much larger.
But as far
we're in the top 70.
Would you be considered privately owned?
Yes. Yep.
So then where do you rank in the privately owned?
I think top 70.
Top 70
in the world. Yeah.
Gotcha. So what separates you from like the average operator?
Operations. We know what we're doing, and we've been through the cycle. 80% of all the funds in self-storage have never been through a recession. 80% of all people taking money have never even been through a recession. So, and two, they've only been around since 2018. Brand new, right? We've been through the cycles, and we understand, I believe, value better than other people do. And so that, and then having the experience and the operations come in, those two things are where our value is. We can measure it, we can understand it, and then we have the execution part where we built it out and we know how to operate it. So that's where our value and what sets us apart. I think it really is.
So if someone's listening right now, like I want to do a deal with AJ.
Yeah.
What is your criteria?
So my criteria in general is over 50,000 net rentable square feet. And markets have to be growing. We like second tier or third tier markets primarily. I don't want really things if it's under 50,000 people, I start to not be that interested. And I don't want markets that aren't growing. If it's got stagnant population or negative population, generally we don't want to look at it. But if it's a mom and pop owned, over 50,000 people and over 50,000 net rentable square feet in a market that's growing, we're interested.
Gotcha. Simple.
Yep.
Right. It's not overly complicated.
Nope.
So, your business today versus when you first got out of the hospital.
Yeah.
I mean, when you got out of the hospital, like you were still funding everything on your own,
100%,
and managing everything on your own as a side hustle.
Yep.
What were those numbers like back then?
So we built $100 million. We're at, we say 350.
Was 100 million as a side hustle?
Yeah. I know, right? But 350 million, we have over 3 million square feet. So that's probably being pretty conservative. But we tripled plus our employees. We have went from 1 or 2 companies to a portfolio of 7 now. Mm-hmm. It's totally different. It's wild to even think about how different it is today than it was.
So you were talking about freedom earlier, right? Freedom is not to sit around and do nothing. Freedom is to do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Would you say you've got that now?
Probably not quite in the way that I want, actually.
Yeah.
I'm very interested in big problems.
Mm-hmm.
Big problems. So freedom for me would be able to solve really big problems. Like we really want to solve problems with like the school system. We want to do that. So I think I still have a little more to go, but in general, I can do whatever I want. So that's fine. We can, yeah.
So school system, that's interesting.
Yes.
And because you mentioned earlier that your wife started a business for that reason.
Yep.
So what is it you want to do with the school system?
So we would like to fundamentally change and create alternative options to the school system. Mm-hmm. The school system is antiquated. It doesn't work. Its performance is, to say it's bad is an understatement. Mm-hmm. In fact, most of the time it does probably more damage than it does good. The school system is ran by the teachers union, which is the largest union in the world.
Is it?
Yep. And it is the most powerful union in the world, and it is there to protect teachers. Mm-hmm. We should have a kids union, I think,
mm-hmm.
or
a parents union,
or a parents union. And parents have been eliminated, and the school system has changed into something that it was never designed to do. Mm-hmm. The schools are actually built by the same people that build prisons. It's the same government contract, and you mass put kids into a system that entire incentive structure is predicated by seats in the butts, not actual performance. And so you cram kids in. So the structure of the school system has actually gotten away from the child. Mm-hmm. And then therefore it doesn't have anything applicable. Most of the things that they learn today is predicated on a regurgitated process to be able to regurgitate information mm-hmm. as if we didn't have computers or anything else. And most of the information is not applicable at all. So if you gave a kid a phone, he would ace every single test. Then why is he taking those tests? Mm-hmm. What is he learning from it? And does he understand the concept and the application of it? And the school system isn't even built for that.
Right.
It's you have 10 questions. You need to memorize these 10 questions and then put them on this piece of paper from this piece of paper. Mm-hmm. If you can remember to put those 10 answers down, you'll get an A. If you don't, you're going to fail. And if you fail this one, that actually hurts you in the other one, even if you were, it actually makes no sense at all. Mm-hmm. And so we're not preparing kids. We're not setting up the very thing that we need is the youth to come out to be able to be productive, to actually take our country. We don't do that at all in the United States. And so one of the big things that my wife's school was to create applicable knowledge that can be transferred and utilized, that it is, we understand the meaning behind it and how the application works, why we're learning it, mm-hmm. and that the concepts then can be used. Economics, we talk business, right? But then everything else, they have mindset. They teach kids on what it means to take care of yourself and others. Like fundamental things. Colleges, they asked the colleges, they said, what is the number one thing that you want kids to learn? And guess what they said? It was basic principles like washing dishes, taking care of their clothes, taking care of themselves. That's what they wanted.
Who wants that?
The colleges.
Really?
Yeah, they're like, the kids don't know what to do. They don't know how to take care of themselves. They don't know how to do the basic things.
Oh, you're saying the colleges?
Yeah, when the school asked the colleges, what's the number one thing you think kids should learn or whatnot? That was their answer.
Yeah.
And which is wild to think about.
That's very disappointing to hear.
Yeah,
the
standard's
really low.
Yep. And so when you look at it, you're going, well, then what in the world are they doing for 18 years? 18 years. And they come out, they don't know how to balance a checkbook. They don't understand the basics of making it through a day.
Yeah.
Like, that's a huge, huge problem that we have. And they're not self-sufficient. So what we've done is we've taught them to be dependent on something. We're going to give you the answers, and if you get them wrong, you fail. You are dependent on me for a passing grade, and it has to be done exactly how I say.
Right.
That is not how life works at all. And so we're actually I think we have to rehabilitate kids. No. Guess what? The teacher's not God, and everything that they say is not right. That's not how this works. Yeah. Actually, most of the time, that's the opposite. And just because they understand one thing here doesn't apply. And you have to retrain them how to critical think and how failing is actually good and okay. Yeah. It's good to have 10 questions and to question the questions that you have and to give an alternative answer. Yeah, that's good. You shouldn't fail.
So there's a couple different things. I have a friend, someone I grew up with since I was 12. He's my state senator. And he proposed a bill where you couldn't graduate high school until you'd taken a half credit. So senior year of high school, either first semester or second semester, you had to take one class on financial literacy. And they got killed.
Yeah.
On the floor, because he's a Republican. And the guys that killed it, because it was party lines, right? He's Republican, Democrats killed it. And they're like, the problem with our country is not financial literacy. It's like, oh my God, right? So,
are you kidding me? It's so crazy when you think about it. I was having this conversation the other day. So we teach the kids everything you need to know about how the world works. And when I say the world, I mean how flowers, take in sunlight and turn that into energy. But every part of the world that they interact with on a daily basis is predicated on economics. There is nothing that they do in life that is not predicated on that.
Right.
And we don't teach them anything about that.
Yeah.
It is just as important as the natural world, the economic world is. And people are like, that's not true. And I'm like, how's that not true? How? Tell me. The only reason the school even exists, the only reason we are here, the only reason anything we have, food, medicine, nothing exists without that.
Yeah, it's a very sophisticated, maybe not very sophisticated, it's a glorified daycare.
Absolutely. It's a glorified daycare. It's teaching baseline principles.
And I'm doing my best to insulate my kids because they do go through school.
Yep.
And the one thing they have to learn is critical thinking. And what I've said to them is if there's anything that you learn in school that is not in alignment with how you view the world, we're not going to question the teacher.
Yeah.
You just go with what the teacher says.
Yeah.
Come home
and ask us.
And ask for clarity.
100%.
Yeah.
You ask here. And 2, you can question. I mean, whatever they tell you, you don't need to just accept.
Yeah.
That is not how this works.
Right.
And it's the fact that we're training kids that's not true. And 2, let me be very clear. I love teachers. And in fact, when you look at the school, her school doesn't have tenure, doesn't have anything else like that. They attract the best teachers. Why? Because the best teachers leave the school system because they protect the worst teachers.
Right.
And so they don't want to be that. So I'm like, we need to actually pay more and protect the best teachers. But in a system that is predicated not on outcome and protecting the individual from anything that could go wrong, regardless of performance.
Right.
The outcome's the outcome. I don't know why we're surprised.
Yeah. I think, I have no problems with any individual teachers.
No.
I have a problem with how they group up.
Bingo.
What is your why? I mean, your why, I would imagine, has a different lens.
Yes.
So what is your why?
So really my why has become to teach and allow people to participate in really dislocating themselves from their income. It is about financial independence in probably a way that I think differently than other people. But my why is to allow people what is true freedom. And economic freedom is true freedom. And it's freedom of thought. It's freedom of practice. It's freedom of will. It's also freedom of creation. And when the reason I'm so believing that because of what it did for me and how it saved me. So that's become my why. And I feel like if I could provide what I had to more people, I mean, what it did for me was so incredible and so important. If I can do that to other people, that it's the best thing I could ever do.
Yeah,
and
absolutely. I think that's absolutely powerful. What's your biggest struggle today?
We need to hire 9 salespeople in the next 5 weeks. We launched our Done For You sales service just a month ago, and the demand for it has been absolutely crazy. We have all these people reaching out to us saying our sales service has been so helpful for them. Please get us more salespeople.
If you are in high ticket sales or looking to get into that space, if you want a calendar filled up with people raising their hand saying, call me at this time, please sell me, I want to be sold to by a highly experienced salesperson, we are looking for you to have that role. We want to take people who are good and make them great. People who want to be held accountable the same way Michael Jordan would want his coach to hold him accountable, to take him to that next level.
So if you want Ian Ross or myself to train you to get better at sales, if you want to be able to control your income, decide exactly how much money you make, and you want to work at a company where you're valued and appreciated, we encourage you, click the link below. However, we're only hiring superstars. If you're not A+ caliber, don't click below.
Hands down, capital. So the capital markets, when we learned the hard way that, so we started working with accredited investors, right? And to source our equity and our capital. And the first time investing right, and as markets change, it was really interesting to see how investor sentiment changed. And at the time when we're like, this is the best time to be investing, it's the hardest time to get investors. Now, I guess I understand that because that's how markets work, but I didn't understand that the people with the money would just not put it to work. That was weird to me because we made so much money doing the opposite, right? After 2008, we doubled up. And when you look, when you understand value, you're like, this is actually the safest time. You think 2 years was the safest time, but that's when prices were the highest. Why? Because they confuse price with value. Price doesn't mean value. Value is what you get from what you buy. So if I buy an asset and it makes $100,000, and then that asset's worth $1 million, okay, at that time. Now, that asset goes to $3 million, and you think because the price is higher, you buy it because it's worth more. It's not. It's worth less than it was at $1 million. And then all of a sudden the price goes down, back down to $1 million, and you don't want to buy it because the price is dropping. What? It's worth more because what you're buying is the $100,000.
Yeah, the ROI is high. It was interesting because I haven't had to experience. I'm not dealing with investors so much per se, right? Like I'm mostly a solo operator. But I got to witness this firsthand because I went through the crash in 07 through 11. And I would just be flabbergasted. I was just looking at everyone. I was like, I don't want to buy right now. Like, why not?
Why not?
Why don't you want to buy
Prices are down.
Right. And I was like, God, at that time, if I knew how to raise capital, the wealth I would have today.
Staggering.
Right. So I keep saying, looking forward to the next bad crash because I'm going to buy everything. Right. You know, like you're talking about the sentiment, you know, Warren Buffett, right? When there's blood in the streets, that's the time to buy.
It's time to buy.
Do what everyone else is doing. If people are buying, don't. Everyone's selling, buy. It's fascinating. We've all heard these things, but our human behavior. People say
that too.
Yeah.
I know we have investors that say that. And then when you say invest, I don't want to, price down. I'm going to wait till things stabilize or go back up. And you're going, there's such a disconnect, right?
Oh, yeah.
There.
Human behavior, the words and the alignment.
Oh, totally.
Or the words and the action don't
align. And it's that emotion driven that I think affects people more than they actually believe it does. And that's been an interesting thing for me to learn. So we've looked at our business and say, how do we stabilize capital where the whole point of my business is to allow normal people in to invest. But then all of a sudden, if they don't want to invest, obviously you don't force them. So then I'm like, we need to find, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tranche out capitals. So we have a stabilizing capital because wealthy people, and by wealthy people, I mean really wealthy people, they're placing money,
Yeah.
right? So we've never dealt with wealthy people because that's not my why. But I'm like, my business can't stop because they don't want to. So I'm like, all right, so what we'll do is tranche it out and we'll allow accredited investors and Main Street investors to invest. But I have to have more of a consistent source of capital. So that's been the biggest thing that we've been working over the last 6-8 months is stabilizing those spreads and capital so we can continue at a known rate.
Gotcha. What's your superpower?
Man. Generally speaking, I think my superpower has been seeing what others don't. It's been easy for me to look and see value and also see trends in markets and things that people just didn't seem to get. And in fact, they thought it was wrong at the time, always. And it was easy for me to say, well, I get what you're saying, but it makes sense. And to see, I wrote 3 years ago what I called the self-storage bubble, which I said the self-storage market is going to not crash, but it's going to contract. And at the time, that was crazy. Storage was hot. Everything was going good. And everybody was like, what? I've never even heard a bull or bearish case on this. And it was millions of people saw it. And I talked to tons of banks and everything. And 6 months later, it happened. We had the largest contraction in 2022 and into 2023 in storage rates ever, which I explained literally 10 months prior and exactly why it was going to happen.
Do you think it's because you can interpret data better?
Yeah,
or?
Exactly. I think I understand it better. I understand the relationship between data better.
Yeah.
Why one thing affects another thing. It's a process, right? So it's not independent data doesn't really matter, but it's the relationship that data has with, and then how it works in application.
I mean, one of the most valuable skills, people call it intelligence, not necessarily intelligence, but the ability to connect the dots.
Yes.
Right. I think Ray Dalio talks about it in Principles, right? Like,
yes.
You need someone that can connect the dots. And so you're saying like that's, you can see a
speaking.
pattern before other people see the pattern.
Yeah. And two, it's not even like, because I think people think that I'm saying that I time markets. I don't do that at all. And when I say that it's going to be a storage contraction, I didn't time a market. I don't believe in that, actually. I'm completely contrary to that. I looked and said, here's fundamentals of value. Here's what's happening. The relationship between the drivers of revenue, which then affect value, right? We have undermining. That means we're going to have a contraction in revenue because we can see that demand slide. I don't want anybody to be confused that in any way, shape, or form I'm saying time markets. I actually don't believe in that. I don't believe I can. I don't believe anybody can.
But you can say, here's what's probably going to happen.
And two, here's why. So we need to invest a certain way because if it does happen, right? So we said, okay, we're going to have inflation. Inflation. Everybody's like, there's not going to be inflation, which was wild to me.
Anyone that said there wasn't going to be inflation, you can just dismiss them from your life.
Exactly. And two, it's like, I can invest. If there's not inflation, I still win.
Yeah.
But I can, if there is, I've also hedged against it. And so I don't think I'm predicting it, but I can see exactly like there's this side, and this is how we can prepare and better position ourselves.
I don't want to say this and have it come across as disrespectful anyway.
Yeah.
But you're almost like the barefoot guy in The Big Short.
Yeah, a little. Yeah. I'm severely ADD and other things. So yeah, no, I really like that stuff. It's interesting to me.
Well, I mean, it's a valuable skill, so it's very, very fortunate. What's your biggest regret?
That's tough. I don't regret a lot. I guess I don't really much have time to, or care to. I guess if I regretted. I guess I could always say I didn't go bigger sooner. So I just regret that today. I should go bigger today. So always.
Gotcha. And then what book have you gifted more than any other?
The Warren Buffett Way.
Check that one out. I've never checked that one out.
Yep. It's one of my favorite books. It takes all of his principles, writings, categorizes them. It's incredible when looking at value and how he does value-based investing and market interpretations. And
yeah. I still need to check out the Charlie Munger.
I know, me too.
Whatever.
Yeah.
It was Almanac.
Yes. I
Charlie's
gotta check
Almanac.
that one too.
Gotta check that one out. Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, why not listen to the second best investor of all time, right after Nancy Pelosi?
That's right.
Right. Okay, so I want you to think about some last thoughts.
Yeah.
I'm gonna leave all the listeners with, guys. If you have value today, I hope you guys get incredible value. I mean, AJ's just poured a ton of knowledge here. Subscribe, send this to your friends. That way we can reach more people. What are some last thoughts you'd like to leave all the listeners with?
I think we not only do we overcomplicate things, but we prioritize things wrong. And I'm speaking from experience, meaning we prioritize either our fears or we prioritize, we think things are more important than they are, including ourselves. And we think things are more dangerous than they are. And if we could understand, and you could have one skill, which is something that I want, it is to better understand the reality and the impact of what we not only do, but what we fear. And by doing that and by able to be doing that, that freed me up a lot. Yeah. And it made me realize more how most of the things that were holding me back were not only inconsequential, they were also irrelevant. And that was a really stupid
It's all in your head.
Yeah.
No, we are our biggest enemy.
100%.
Yeah. I was having a conversation with someone and I shared with him, I was like, have you noticed like all your biggest problems have one thing in common?
Exactly.
And he did not like that observation.
Well, that's another thing. Pride is probably the biggest killer that we have.
So cool. We'll wrap up here. Thank you for coming on. Thank you guys for watching. And we'll see you guys next time.
Shout out to Steve Trang. Jump on the Steve Trang. We real estate disruptors.